Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's Shadow at Night for Wednesday, August the 6th, 2025. On the show tonight for you all access Nighthawks on shadowdavis.com in the extension starting around 9 o'clock Central tonight. We put together kind of a special for you on the Cloward-Piven strategy. This is a strategy designed in 1966 that essentially would destroy a free and democratic society from the inside out. And apparently it's in play right now in every single Western country to different degrees. And even the regions of the countries in question here are moving at different paces and using different strategies at different times. It's really quite fascinating to watch. If you know exactly what's going on, you can see what's going on in Nova Scotia as compared to Manitoba, as compared to British Columbia, Ontario. Like I said, they're moving the pieces around, it seems, depending maybe on who's in power in what province. And the same thing is going on in the United States to some extent, although it does seem to have stopped in the red states, mostly because Donald Trump has got the say-so in the Republican states. And, of course, the federal power as well in both the House and in the Senate. But that doesn't mean that his strategy is stopped either. It's a fascinating study, really, when you think about it. And I was postulating last night on the extension that I don't think it's one cabal in play any longer like it used to be. I think there's 2 or 3 of them in play right now, and it's a power struggle at the top. It's a battle of the titans, of the giants, and they all want complete control, and they're trying to snuff the other guys out or get them to go along with their plan. And I think there's some people who have decided, no, we're going to go this way. This is the way to go. And they're very powerful as well. And it's a clash. And we're the ones who are caught in the middle of it as we watch what's going on, trying to fight back against it. I don't know if we can. The only way is for us to be able to get the word out to people in a way that they can understand, relate to, and believe. Because they got to know there's something going on. They've got to feel it. I mean, it's out there, right? I mean, we've got these senses. They say there's 5 senses. I say there's way more than that. We've got a sense. We know what's going on. Somehow you know when something bad is going to happen, something good is going to happen. You feel it. I can feel it in my bones. You've heard that expression before, right? Well, these folks out there who are walking around willfully blind, they know inside that there's something the matter. Things aren't the same as they were. And it's up to us to find the key that unlocks that. And I know there's more and more people who are waking up, but it seems like such a slow process. I was in Superstore this morning. And by the way, maybe you guys can help me out with this one. I saw about half the staff. This was very early this morning. I'm not usually at a grocery store at 7:30 in the morning, but I was today for whatever reason. And half the staff was wearing surgical masks. And I thought, that's interesting. I never usually see that. So maybe there's something going on with Loblaws. Maybe they've issued a directive to their staff saying, well, you know what? You should wear masks. Or maybe there's a bonus for wearing a mask these days. I don't know. So maybe if you know somebody or you yourself work for Loblaws or an extension of Loblaws, you can find out if a memo like that, a directive like that has been issued to the staff, because I found it interesting that so many staff members were wearing surgical masks this morning. And it made me think, wonder what's going on. Maybe Dr. David Martin was right. But maybe this thing wasn't going to be released July 4th. Maybe it's planned for sometime later this fall. In place of the flu this year, you've got a surprise coming. Who knows what it is? Hello, Michael. How you doing? Watching from Brampton tonight on Facebook. Sean Vision is watching on Twitch. You're the only one. You've got Twitch all to yourself for this show. Unless you guys want to migrate over to Twitch. Sean Vision is the only one who watches on Twitch, man. That's cool. Hello, Kevin from Gilbert, Arizona. Hello, Carla. Debbie is watching tonight. Barbara's watching in Georgetown, Ontario. Hello, Jonathan watching in Ohio. Diane's watching in Kingdom. Or is that Kingston, Ontario? Hello, Shelley in Vermette. Pauline's watching in Kelowna. Deborah is in Hudson, Quebec. Ken is watching in Australia tonight. Good day, mate. Kathy is watching in New Brunswick. Iris, hello, in Morden, Manitoba. Bob's watching in Sudbury. Barbara is watching in Glenora. Janet, I finally get to say hello from the Rock. Hello, Janet. How are you doing? Joan is watching tonight from BC. Bring cash, she says. Tony is watching on X from Calgary. Wherever you guys are watching tonight, whatever platform you're watching on, don't forget to like and share. Get this out to as many people as you possibly can. Mark Carney says he's got up to $700 million of our money to give to the softwood lumber industry in Canada because of Donald Trump's 35% tariffs, because he's the one that can't make a deal. Pierre Poilievre doesn't like that. And also, there's a ban on hiking or even going into the woods, for that matter, in Nova Scotia. There is a massive fine and snitch lines now in place if you catch anybody walking into the woods. So we're going to cover all that in just a couple of seconds. Shadow at Night begins in 30 seconds. All right, welcome back. Let's throw this up on the screen here. I think this is the right one. Yes, Nova Scotia. This is from the Nova Scotia government. News at novascotia.ca. Travel, activities, and woods restricted to prevent wildfires. We just stay out of the woods. We just know that if you go into the woods, you, my friend, are going to cause a fire. Maybe it's a spontaneous combustion thing. I don't know. Maybe just breathing would start something. Nova Scotia restricting travel and activities in the woods because continued hot, dry conditions have greatly increased the risk of wildfires. And we've seen the risk of wildfires elevated in several provinces, but I don't think I've ever seen this where a province says, no, you can't go for a walk in the woods. Restrictions were effective as of 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, include hiking, camping, fishing, and the use of vehicles in the woods. Trail systems through the woods off limits. Camping is allowed only in campgrounds. These and other measures are in place on provincial, crown, and private land until October the 15th. Ooh, that's the entire rest of the summer, baby. Or until conditions allow them to be lifted. The fine for violating these restrictions, $25,000. Quick facts. The restrictions were put in place through a proclamation under the Forest Act. People with questions about the restrictions can call their local Department of Natural Resources office. A province-wide ban on open fires started July 30th and will remain in place until October 15th or until conditions improve. The fine for violating that ban, again, $25,000. Here's the premier of that province, Tim Houston.
Effective 4 p.m. today, we're telling Nova Scotians, stay out of the woods. We are restricting travel and activities that really aren't necessary for most of us. Hiking, camping, fishing, and the use of vehicles in the woods are not permitted. Trail systems through woods are off limits. Camping is allowed, but only in official campgrounds. The fine for violating any of these bans is the same as the fine for the ban on burning, $25,000. And if you're a smoker, for God's sakes, be mindful of where you're butting your butt out. If you don't, and you cause a fire, we will hold you accountable. So what does this mean if you have a home or cottage surrounded by a wooded area? We strongly encourage you to stay out of those woods.
I get the impression that this dude is going to be looking for somebody to blame if another fire starts. You, smoker, Bob, you started that fire, and I can prove it. How? Exactly. Do you have video of me lighting up way deep in the bush? Like, is this guy insane? Let's continue.
Regardless of where they are. Please don't do anything that could unnecessarily put you, your family, or your neighbors at risk. This situation sucks. Summer is one of the best times in Nova Scotia, and we all look forward to getting outdoors and enjoying our scenic beauty that surrounds us. I get that, and I'm right there with you as Nova Scotians. But you can still go to the beach. In fact, that's a great place to be on these hot, dry days. Just no bonfires. If there's a short trail to get from point A to point B, like from...
You can't have a bonfire on the beach now? With the sand and the ocean. No bonfires on the beach.
The parking to the beach or to the lake to fish, that's fine. But that's it. No heading into the woods to spend time there. I know it's inconvenient. I know it's the height of summer vacation and people want to do all the activities that we so much enjoy in our great outdoors. We have a beautiful province. I know everybody wants to enjoy it, but we have to stay out of the woods. It's a small price to pay right now to avoid the kind of devastation that we saw from the wildfires in 2023. Nobody wants to go back there.
All right. He has the demeanor of a premier from the COVID era. Notably, Brian Pallister comes to my mind, the former premier of Manitoba. I know it's awful. I know that it's terrible not being able to leave the house. You're not being able to have friends and family over for Christmas. And he started crying even. I mean, Houston there seemed on the verge of tears, almost like he's being forced to do this. Maybe he is. You can't have your grandparents over for Easter. That's what this seems like to me. And look at this. On the website, novascotia.ca, report violations to 1-800-565-2224. If you see somebody walking into the woods, report it at this number. And don't think for 1 second that the same people who were reporting their neighbors for having one too many people over for Christmas or Easter back during the COVID era won't do that again. They will. Oh, yes, they will. What does John Carpay and the JCCF think of this? By the way, John Carpay will be joining the show again tomorrow night. Of course, he's the president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. We've got a couple more cases to discuss. That's, again, tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Central on the Shadow at Night live stream. This anti-freedom policy is extreme, violates charter-protected freedom of movement. Oh, yes, it does. And unless the government can prove Section 1 of the Charter or use the notwithstanding clause, they're violating the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This makes no sense at all. Tim Houston tagged in this post. Hiking on trails and driving on off-grid roads in the woods does not cause fires. The government can ban smoking in the woods and campfires in the woods, but not ban Canadians from enjoying the woods. I wonder if they're going to make a case. I wonder if the JCCF is seriously considering making a case against the government of Nova Scotia, because this is overreach. And you know that it's another trial balloon, right? These governments are trying little by little, step by step, to keep pushing us and pushing us and pushing us and pushing us. And if somebody says something, they'll pull back a little bit, but they've already made that progress. It's gas prices. It's gas prices. We wake up on a Monday morning. The gas price has gone from 133.9 a liter way up to 165 a liter. We scream and yell and so they bring it down after a couple of days. It comes back down to 145 and all of us are feeling great. We did it. We got them to bring the gas price down, but it's still 12 cents higher than it was 3 days ago. Did you forget that? That's what the governments are doing. Provincial, municipal, federal, especially in all Western countries. It's happening. It's bracket creep. They are pushing and pushing and pushing more authoritarianism on us under the guise of care, under the guise of it's for your safety. Don't you understand? It's for your safety. Mark Carney, he can't make a deal with Donald Trump, one of the only countries that's still deal-less with the United States, even though that's what he ran on. Isn't that what he ran on? It's what he ran on. So the tariffs are 35%. Canadian softwood lumber suffering more than ever. And we've always had a problem with the softwood lumber in the United States. It's always been an issue all the way back to the 1990s or even before that, I think, during the Brian Mulroney era. So Carney has come up with an alternative. Instead of selling our lumber to the United States, we're going to use it ourselves, and we're going to give the softwood lumber industry in Canada up to 700 billion tax dollars. Here he is making that announcement yesterday.
Opportunity with Minister Hodgson, Secretary of State Fuhr. Today I'm announcing a series of new measures to help the softwood lumber industry pivot to a growing Canadian market and to the markets of reliable trading.
My mistake. I said 700 billion. It's 700 million. I apologize. That's quite a difference.
Partners around the world. The first pillar is to give our companies that need liquidity that liquidity in order to address immediate pressures. To do so, we'll provide up to $700 million in loan guarantees. This will ensure that forestry companies of all sizes have the competitive financing they need to maintain and restructure, if necessary, their operations during a period of profound transformation. Second, to make the softwood lumber industry more competitive for the long term, we will provide an additional $500 million, largely in grants and contributions to supercharge new product development and new market diversification. Products such as reinforced timber and low-carbon wood fiber-based insulation materials that are used in prefabricated and modular housing. These investments will increase domestic processing and value added, particularly as technology changes the way we build. This new funding will include initiatives to support Indigenous-led forestry business development and diversification, something that Gorman has stood behind for decades. Third, we will be our own best customer by relying more on Canadian lumber, Canadian softwood for Canadian projects. Canada's new government has a strong mandate to get big things built faster. That means millions of more homes, major new ports, new trade corridors, new energy projects. And as we build bigger and faster, we will build Canadian.
Yeah, he hasn't gotten anything built yet, not even started. And I guess we're going to have to be our own best customer because nobody wants to deal with us. Nobody. Look at this. We sent a couple of ministers down to Mexico this week to maybe start some trade negotiations. And the president down there, Claudia Sheinbaum, says no need for a bilateral trade deal with Canada. She said that today. We don't really need a deal. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum ruled out a bilateral trade agreement with Canada when asked about the possibility following what she called a very good meeting with top Canadian government ministers a day earlier. We have the trade deal with the United States, Canada, Mexico. There's no need, Sheinbaum said during her morning press conference, where she said she discussed expanding direct trade with Canada. Sheinbaum also confirmed Mark Carney will soon travel to Mexico for direct talks, but no date has been set for that visit. Tuesday's meeting was a prep meeting for Carney's visit, and it was a very good meeting, she told reporters, but we don't need it. We've got the USMCA. We don't need the bilateral. I mean, there's the framework to strengthen the Mexico-Canada relationship, as we're doing with other countries, she said. Finance Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne and Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand were in Mexico to strengthen the country's relationship days after the United States hit Canada with higher tariffs, again 35%. Champagne said during a virtual press conference from Mexico City last night that it was a very successful trip and the mission was to get to know each other a bit better, but we don't have a deal. And she says there's no need for a deal. What does Pierre Poilievre have to say about this softwood lumber $700 million fiasco?
Our hearts are today with the workers in the forestry sector. Our loggers, our mill workers, and the many towns that rely on them are obviously suffering after 10 years of unfair tariffs on our workers, tariffs that have doubled under Mark Carney, tariffs that have been applied by 3 U.S. presidents over a decade of Liberal diplomatic failures. To be clear, these tariffs are wrong and unjustifiable. That's precisely why Stephen Harper was so successful at eliminating them in just 80 days as Prime Minister. He even got them refunded. Yet, Mark Carney has been Prime Minister for over 140 days, and still the tariffs are there and rising. The Liberals have been in power for a decade with 3 presidents, and the tariffs are only growing. Mark Carney promised us that he would put elbows up, that he would handle Trump, and that he would negotiate a win by ending the tariffs. He's broken all of those promises. And we know President Trump is someone that nobody can control, but that's why it was wrong for Mr. Carney to promise that he could do so. Ever since Mark Carney became Prime Minister, there have been more tariffs and rising tariffs, contrary to Mr. Carney's own promises. Again, contrary to his promise, under Mark Carney's leadership, it has been elbows down and tariffs up. Today, he offers only more debt to forestry companies as they are hemorrhaging money and jobs which are heading south of the border. And we see workers in forestry towns across the country worried they're going to lose their jobs. Conservatives will fight for Canada. We'll put our country first. We've offered Prime Minister Carney to work with him in order to secure a real deal, and that offer remains open. In the meantime, we're pushing for lower taxes on work, investment, home building, and of course energy. By cutting taxes on home building, we can create more domestic demand for our lumber that will create jobs for our workers and houses for our youth. We propose eliminating red tape to build more and strengthen our extremely weak economy. And we pledge to work with all parties to achieve all of this. Unfortunately, Mr. Carney is not living up to the many bold promises that he made, that he was going to handle Trump, negotiate a win, and put his elbows up. But we will put aside his failures and offer to work with anybody in order to put Canada first. Our goal is to protect the jobs of workers, the prices of our consumers, and to make our economy strong, self-reliant, and sovereign. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so this is something Polyev was talking about during the election campaign. I'm going to throw this up on the screen here real quick so you guys can see. Remember, this came from the Privy Council Office of Canada. In 10 years, this is an AI, Google AI overview. And the way Carney's running the country, this is not shocking. This came out, I think, in late March. In 10 years, Canadians may increasingly forage for food due to a combination of factors, including a potential decline in social mobility, climate change, impacts on food security, and shifts in government relevance. This could involve hunting, fishing, and gathering on public lands, as well as increased small-scale agriculture. Factors contributing to increased foraging. You can see consumer preferences. While there's a current trend towards sustainable and ethically produced food, the willingness to pay more for it is decreasing. Typical. Potentially leading to a shift in focus towards more affordable and potentially less regulated food sources like foraging. Foraging. Now let's get back to Mark Carney for just a second here. Remember, he has that blind trust, right? And we found out he still has interests in Brookfield. Let me throw this up on the screen real fast. This came from the Conservative Party of Canada not so long ago, when it was revealed that Carney still had interests in many things, even though he said he owned just cash and in real estate. That was what he said during the election campaign. Pierre Poilievre released the following statement on Carney's ethics disclosures. And again, this goes back a few weeks. Well, Mark Carney was on vacation a few weeks ago. His long-hidden ethics disclosures were quietly released. Unfortunately for Canadians, it raises far more questions than answers. The disclosures reveal Carney must recuse himself from decisions involving around 100 companies through a conflict of interest screen, yet many of those same companies are still included in his investment portfolio held within a so-called blind trust. His disclosures also show 574 separate stock holdings, either directly or through pooled funds, 91% of them headquartered in the United States. Mark Carney stated during the election campaign he owned nothing but cash and personal real estate. He claimed he didn't know was in his blind trust. That was a lie. His own disclosures released conveniently after the election proved this was a falsehood. It appears Carney's friends aren't worried about the screens. On April 30th, North River Midstream lobbied him. On May 6th, he met with Sam Pollock, CEO of Brookfield Infrastructure. Both of these companies are listed as being covered by Mark Carney's ethics screen. So then let's move over to this. Yes, Brookfield has significant involvement in Canada's softwood lumber industry. They own or manage large areas of timberland, particularly in British Columbia. They're involved in logging and lumber production. Brookfield's timber operations include Island Timberlands Limited Partnership in Canada, Longview Timber Holdings Corp. In the United States. Brookfield's involvement in the Canadian softwood lumber industry includes da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And Mark Carney still has interest in Brookfield. So him giving $700 million of our money to the softwood lumber industry reeks of personal gain, reeks of conflict of interest. And yet we can do nothing about it. A violation like that should have him removed from office. But the left-wing corporate media doesn't even bat an eye. Oh, by the way, Pierre Poilievre has that by-election coming up in Battle River Crowfoot on Monday, August the 18th. There's advanced voting this weekend. If you live in that riding, you might want to check electionscanada.ca for more information. CBC's got a crying room. We're going to get to that in just a second. Yeah, they've got a crying room. We talked about this a little bit last night. It was revealed on Northern Perspective a couple of days ago. We've got a short video clip of that for you guys. In a press release, this is interesting. The headline here from left-wing corporate CTV, Spain has dismantled a smuggling ring, moving migrants to Canada with fake passports. That from the police. What police? Just police. Great reporting, CTV. Spanish police say they have dismantled a criminal network that facilitated illegal entry into Canada and the UK using forged passports and travel documents. In a press release by Spain's National Police, hang on, I've got a video I want to play for you guys that kind of relates to this. Yeah, coming up in just a second. In a press release by Spain's National Police, the smuggling operation primarily targeted Yemeni nationals and involved more than 40 migration attempts. The network allegedly charged each migrant up to $4,400. According to Spanish authorities, the investigation began in September of last year after the Canada Border Services Agency tipped off Spanish police about several Yemeni citizens attempting to travel to Canada from airports in Spain using fake documents. 11 people, including the alleged ringleader, have been arrested across several areas in Spain. They couldn't do it here? Spanish police worked in collaboration with Europol and law enforcement agencies from countries including Switzerland, Finland, Austria, Germany, Ireland, and the UK. Police said migrants would first obtain refugee documents in Greece, then travel to a European airport. Once inside the international transit area, the migrants would allegedly receive a boarding pass and counterfeit passport from a member of the network. Wonder why Canada was targeted by this criminal operation. Is it because it's that easy to get in here? We're going to go more into this, you guys, tonight on the extension for you Nighthawks. You all access Nighthawks on shadowdavis.com. And if you're not a member of the website, become one. You get all that extra content every single night. And you don't have to watch it at night. You can come back and watch it whenever you want to. Just don't forget your username and your password. And make sure you occasionally clear your cache, your cookies, like once a week or so, like you should anyway. So you have free and unfettered access to the website, shadowdavis.com, SHADOEDAVIS.com. Spanish police coordinated raids in Madrid and northern towns of Santona and Torrelavega. During the searches, officers seized 10 mobile phones, a forged passport, and documents related to flight bookings. Spanish police say the investigation remains ongoing. You mean there's more? Now look at this scene in Calgary. This was on City News, left-wing corporate City News in Calgary on their breakfast show just this morning. There was a fatality involving LRT, that's light rail transit in Calgary. Somebody died, sadly. But because of that, the LRT wasn't moving and people needed to catch a bus. And so this is what it looked like.
Watch as you see a woman in a brown jacket running alongside the moving shuttle bus with a massive group of bus users chasing down the bus in an attempt to board it. In response to the scene of the Franklin LRT station, Calgary Transit says in a statement, as soon as we are made aware of a situation, Calgary Transit promptly deploys shuttles to assist customers. In this case, 13 shuttles have been deployed. Transit ambassadors are also on site, helping customers with wayfinding and directing them to the shuttles. During the mad rush to catch a bus, this man says this is something he's seen before.
In my homeland like this.
Yeah. Does it remind you of your homeland? Where's your homeland?
Punjab.
And it's like this?
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that shocking? It's looking more and more like India here in Canada every single day. All right, changing gears just a little bit. This is actually a pretty decent editorial piece from Kevin Klein, who is the owner or part owner and publisher of the Winnipeg Sun. He says, because, you know, somebody was asking me yesterday or maybe even this morning, because it's been a long day, what's the Manitoba perspective on, you know, sovereignty? Because Alberta, that's the big talk in Alberta right now. We got to separate from the country, and I'm certainly hoping that they have that referendum very, very soon and they vote to leave. I really hope that happens because I think it's one of the last hopes that we have. In Saskatchewan, people are talking about it as well, but in Manitoba. And so people in Saskatchewan are naturally curious. What about Manitoba? No. It's because the demographic breakdown and the population breakdown of the province of Manitoba is so much different than Alberta and Saskatchewan. Less people than Alberta, more people, slightly more people than Saskatchewan, but Saskatchewan's population is scattered all through the province. They don't have one major city. They have two medium-sized cities there and then a bunch of smaller 30 to 40,000 sized cities, whereas Manitoba, there's 1.5 million people and 1 million people live in one place. And that one place happens to be a red city, sadly. And so the Manitoba perspective is based upon rural-urban lines, and urban lines win every single time in Manitoba because of the population imbalance. And so the NDP get elected, and they run the province into the ground. This happens every election cycle. And then the Conservatives get in for a term or two. They get booted. The NDP comes back in, and they wreck the province even more, and they run the debt up. But I think this time, Wob Canoe is following that Agenda 2030 plan to the letter. So Klein says, while Alberta, run by Conservatives, as you know, banks $30 billion, Wob Canoe spends like there's no tomorrow. And Manitoba is not a rich province. It could be because of all the minerals here, but they want to leave them in the ground. Alberta has just reported a $30 billion, it's a record, $30 billion in its heritage fund. That number matters not just because it's the highest in the fund's history, but because it shows a government thinking ahead. It's not about oil booms or lucky timing. It's about discipline. Danielle Smith and her finance minister have made it clear. Alberta is saving now to break its dependence on oil and gas revenues, fund essential services like healthcare, education, and keep taxes low for future generations. They set a target of $250 billion in savings by 2050. They've backed that with action, no gimmicks, no excuses. Meanwhile, in Manitoba, the government seems focused on everything but fiscal stability. The gap between the two provinces is no longer just about policy, it's about vision or lack thereof. Manitoba's not saving. Manitoba's borrowing heavily. Under Wob Canoe, Manitoba is moving in the opposite direction of Alberta, and the consequences are piling up. Instead of working to control costs or rein in government, the current administration is signing off on new spending announcements almost daily. Special interest groups are handed checks. More staff are hired. Not one serious cut to government spending has been made. Not one structural reform has been introduced to make government more efficient or more accountable. Hydro rates, that's electric power for those that don't know, going up by 11%. Personal income tax has been raised. The inflation factor that protected taxpayers from bracket creep, gone. At the same time, there is no clear strategy to attract private investment, retain business, or grow the economy in any meaningful way. While Alberta is planning for its financial future, Manitoba's premier is producing TikTok videos mocking foreign politicians and spending public dollars to hire a former CBC reporter to supposedly represent Manitoba in Washington. Is that really the priority when Manitobans are struggling to pay their bills and the province is heading deeper into debt? Let's not kid ourselves. Manitoba's debt burden isn't just a number buried in a budget document. It's a real threat to the ability to fund the services Manitoba needs. Interest payments, eating into healthcare, education, infrastructure, every line item, no fiscal anchor, nothing to stop the bleeding. Healthcare? The NDP talked a big game in opposition, but he makes a mistake here. After over a year in office, there's little to show. We still see emergency room closures, long wait times, nurse shortages. Listening tours are not solutions because they don't listen. Press releases, not policy. Asking Alberta for a bigger share of equalization, not a plan. When it comes to growing Manitoba's economy, it's standing still. Business owners are waiting for leadership. Investors are watching the headlines, walking away. Crime, taxes, bureaucracy, lack of political will are driving people and capital to other provinces, like Alberta. People are voting with their feet, and why wouldn't they? In Alberta, the government is clear. Business matters. Families matter. Tomorrow matters. In Manitoba, all we hear about is new spending today with no thought for who will pay the bill down the line. Even worse, the ideological drift of this government is narrowing opportunity, not expanding it. A cabinet minister publicly stating they'll only hire Indigenous staff regardless of qualification sends a message to business and talent that Manitoba is closed to fair competition. That kind of hiring practice would be called discrimination anywhere else in Canada. Here it's called business as usual. Wednesday. That's not progress, it's short-sighted politics. The clock is ticking. Manitoba doesn't course correct soon. It'll be too deep in the hole to climb out without painful consequences. The path forward is clear, but it requires political courage, the kind we're not seeing from this government. We need to reduce the size and scope of government. Not everything needs to be run from Broadway or Main Street. Let the private sector do what it does best. Give taxpayers a break. Stop trying to micromanage every aspect of our economy. Does he know that he's talking about the NDP? Sometimes I wonder. We need to restore fiscal discipline. That means halting new spending unless it's matched by real savings. That means setting targets for debt reduction, not excuses for more borrowing. They need to make Manitoba competitive, a have province. That includes reducing regulations, providing tax certainty for businesses, creating an investment environment where people want to build, hire, and stay. We need to stop governing for social media clout. The job isn't about likes and follows. It's about the hard work of building a stable, secure, prosperous future. It's about leaving the province better off than we found it. Alberta's doing that. Manitoba is not. This isn't a partisan argument. It's not about left or right. It's about math, markets, momentum. Alberta is setting itself up to thrive in a volatile world. Manitoba drifting, hoping for handouts, passing today's bills to tomorrow's taxpayers. We are the bums of Canada. We don't have to follow this path. But turning around starts with acknowledging the problem. It starts with putting ideology aside and putting results first. It starts with leadership, not performance. If we want our children and grandchildren to live in a strong, growing province, we can't wait for someone else to fix it. We need to demand better now, because the longer we wait, the worse the choices become. And unlike Alberta, we don't have $30 billion. to fall back on. That's again from Kevin Klein, who is the publisher and part owner of the Winnipeg Sun. Manitoba is moving forward towards 15-minute cities, smart cities. The Eco West plan is going from town to town to town all across Manitoba, talking about how they need to build transport corridors between places like Russell and Roblin and Neepawa and Minnedosa and Dauphin. Big, huge economic travel corridors costing millions and millions and millions of dollars for a population of roughly 10,000 people. And now they're spending $4.5 million in Winkler and Morden to connect these two cities, and the two cities together probably about 25,000. Fast-growing part of the province, probably the fastest growing part of the province. They're building a bike path that's 10 kilometers long between Winkler and Morden. A bike path that'll be used probably 4 to 5 months of the year. Connecting cities, creating a hub, so you never ever have to leave your city ever again. Just stay in Winkler Morden. You don't have to get on the highway and drive, even though you can and probably should. It's 5 minutes in the car from Winkler to Morden. But no, let's spend $4.5 million to connect these two cities that are pretty much the same city anyway for a bike path. That's absolutely astounding. Remember we talked about those crazy right-wing extremist white nationalists who were accused of facilitating terrorism in an alleged extremist plot? There's 3 of them. They were denied bail. They're extremists. In the meantime, all of these migrants who commit murder, they get out because the judge is worried about their immigration status. And these guys have not been found guilty of anything, at least not yet. 3 men facing terrorism-related charges in an alleged anti-government plot to forcibly take over land in the Quebec City region have been denied bail. This sounds like a conspiracy theory. It really does. It sounds like something the government made up. It sounds like something the police made up in an effort to try and make Canadians believe. And it sounds like it came from Impact Canada, the nudge squad in Canada that operates out of the Privy Council office. It sounds like this has been made up. And these 3 guys are the stooges. Judge René de la Sabonnière made the decision at Quebec City's courthouse today. The Crown opposed bail for Simon Angers Odette, 24, Raphael Lagacy, 25, and Marc Auriel Chabot, 24. The 3 men appeared in Quebec City Court, were also present during the bail hearing, which lasted 3 days. The contents of the evidence presented at the bail hearing can't be reported because of a publication ban requested by the Crown and granted by the judge. Crown prosecutor, they don't want us to know. Crown prosecutor Gabrielle Lepere spoke to reporters following the decision, saying the judge invoked part of the criminal code outlining justifications for detention, basically that having them released would undermine the administration of justice, so therefore the accused will remain in custody. What? The 3 accused will return to court next month. They're among 4 people arrested in July for allegedly trying to start an anti-government community north of Quebec City. The National Police Force also alleges that one of the accused was running an Instagram account aimed at recruiting members. Angers, Audette, Lagacy, and Chabot face charges of facilitating a terrorist activity and other charges related to the illegal storage of firearms and possession of explosives and prohibited devices. Good Lord. Leaked audio of CBC disciplinary meeting with former TV host Travis Donraj. It shows that the CBC Corporation has a disturbing level of control over their journalists. Travis Donraj's lawyer says, Travis says that he was forced to resign about a month and a half ago after a year and a half of working at the public broadcaster. But the CBC says, no, he still works there. We haven't accepted his resignation. He's still an employee of the CBC. So our friends down there at Northern Perspective had a CBC whistleblower on with them yesterday or the day before. And apparently CBC has got a crying room for their employees. I guess there's so much bad behavior in the hallways at the CBC, especially at their flagship downtown Toronto, that people need a place to go to cry. And here is part of that interview.
Are reaching out to you since Travis came forward. What are they telling you?
I've heard about the crying room.
The crying room.
Yep.
What's the crying room?
The crying room is a place where CBC employees are told to go if they're upset at work about something that happened to them. And they're supposed to shut the door and cry alone there. Yeah.
So
This is a real thing and it's a real place, and you have so many employees crying and upset and in distress that there's a room for them.
So rather than go talk to your union rep, go talk to your union executive, go talk to HR and deal with an issue, go talk to your manager, deal with the issue. We have a room that we just want you to go and cry and get out your emotions. We don't want to deal with them. We don't want to deal with the problem. Just get back to work.
Yep. And don't cry in front of other people. Cry behind a door. This is all really happening, and it's so, I mean, toxic's not even the word I can put towards it. It's beyond that. And that's a term not coined by the employees. That's a term coined by management. They call it the crying room.
Okay, so that puts a different spin on this, just because, and I'm glad you said that, because normally that would be a term that the employees would just make up, but
no,
this is now being viewed as more an official term.
And in fact, the employees wanted to change the name because they were so traumatized by the idea that in their own workplace there was a room called the crying room. They didn't want to call it that. That was management's choice.
They were traumatized.
Okay, what was your reaction when you heard that? Because I'm hearing this for the first time and my mind is exploding.
I haven't shared it with anyone publicly yet.
A full interview, you can find that on Northern Perspective. They're on YouTube and they're on all of the social media platforms. Big news out of the United States, even though Dr. David Martin doesn't think so. Dr. David Martin, as a matter of fact, thinks that the Trump administration, at least certain elements of the Trump administration, are trying to impose another pandemic on us. And Trump doesn't have any knowledge of it because of his handlers, right? So Secretary of HHS, Health and Human Services, RFK Jr. made an announcement today, and some people are ecstatic about this. Other people say, well, so what? Here, watch.
Hi, it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. here, your HHS secretary. At HHS, we have a division called the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, or BARDA. BARDA drives some of our most advanced scientific research. It funds developments of vaccines, drugs, diagnostics, and other tools to fight emerging diseases and national health threats. Over the past few weeks, BARDA reviewed 22 mRNA vaccine development investments and began canceling them. Let me explain why. Most of these shots are for flu or COVID, but as the pandemic showed us, mRNA vaccines don't perform well against viruses that infect the upper respiratory tract. Here's the problem. mRNA only codes for a small part of the viral proteins, usually a single antigen. One mutation and the vaccine becomes ineffective. This dynamic drives a phenomenon called antigenic shift, meaning that the vaccine paradoxically encourages new mutations and can actually prolong pandemics as the virus constantly mutates to escape the protective effects of the vaccine. millions of people, maybe even you or someone you know, caught the Omicron variant despite being vaccinated. That's because a single mutation can make mRNA vaccines ineffective. The same risk applies to flu. After reviewing the science and consulting top experts at NIH and FDA, HHS has determined that mRNA technology poses more risk than benefits for these respiratory viruses. That's why, after extensive review, BARDA has begun the process of terminating these 22 contracts totaling just under $500 million. To replace the troubled mRNA programs, we're prioritizing the development of safer, broader vaccine strategies, like whole virus vaccines and novel platforms that don't collapse when viruses mutate. Let me be absolutely clear. HHS supports safe, effective vaccines for every American who wants them. That's why we're moving beyond the limitations of mRNA for respiratory viruses and investing in better solutions. Thank you.
$500 million for companies that made tens of, if not hundreds of billions in the last 3 years. Really? You think that's going to make an impact on what happens next? I don't even think RFK Jr. thinks that this is going to make an impact at all. I think he's given us a bone to chew on, and that's about it. $500 million to Pfizer? Come on, that's pocket change. That's nothing. That's a drop in the bucket. That's crazy. Big trouble for some high-level Democrats down in the U.S.
Have you talked with the president about his position on the stock trading ban bill before Congress? He obviously had pretty loaded comments about Senator Hawley. There's some reporting that they've since spoken. What is his position on the current status of that bill?
The president has spoken to Senator Hawley, who called him, and the president took that call. As the president said in the Roosevelt Room yesterday, conceptually, he, of course, supports the idea of ensuring that members of Congress and United States senators who are here for public service cannot enrich themselves. And the reason that this idea to put a ban on stock trading for members of Congress is even a thing is because of Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she is rightfully criticized because she makes, I think, $174,000 a year, yet she has a net worth of approximately $413 million. In 2024, Nancy Pelosi's stock portfolio, this was a fascinating statistic to me, grew 70% in 1 year in 2024, and her portfolio outperformed every single large hedge fund in that same year, and even more than doubled the returns of Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. So I think the president stands with the American people on this. He doesn't want to see people like Nancy Pelosi enriching themselves off of public service and ripping off their constituents in the process. As for the mechanics of the legislation and how it will move forward, the White House continues to be in discussions with our friends on Capitol.
Trump administration source telling The Angle that a criminal investigation of Adam Schiff is underway, conducted by U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland for possible charges involving mortgage fraud. Now, this follows the story we broke last month when the Federal Housing Finance Agency sent a criminal referral to the DOJ alleging that Schiff, in multiple instances, falsified bank documents and property records to acquire more favorable loan terms. In a 2011 affidavit signed by the then California congressman, he certified that a property in Montgomery County, Maryland, is his primary residence. He also owns a condo in Burbank, California, which he's also claimed is his primary residence, and said so in 2023 during his campaign for Senate.
I think just about every member of Congress has a residence in their state and a residence back in D.C. since we're in session much of the week. And people make a family decision where they're going to have their kids. But our principal residence, our primary residence is in California. It always has been and always will be.
Ruh-roh. Well, Senator Schiff has not responded to us about these allegations, but we were able to find a statement that his campaign spokesperson gave to CNN back in 2023. She said that the Burbank condo is his primary residence, but Adams, California and Maryland addresses have been listed as primary residences for loan purposes because they're both occupied throughout the year and to distinguish them from a vacation property. Well, the law does not work that way. Let me just say that, but nice try. Look, it's anyone's guess what happens next, but we're going to stay on this story.
Laura Ingraham have some work done? So these people, Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff and the Clintons and Obama, all pushing the Steele dossier and the Russia hoax on Donald Trump. And yet they're doing this stuff, illegal stuff. Well, Trump didn't. All very interesting. Elon Musk was on Joe Rogan back in February before the fight he and Trump had, and he was talking about the moment that he lost respect for the Democrats, specifically Barack Obama.
That the Russia thing was real.
Yeah, still.
And it was, I mean, the whole Steele dossier where it was like completely concocted. The Clinton campaign funded a fake conspiracy theory, a fake Russia collusion hoax regarding Trump that was completely false.
And they reiterated it on television for 3 fucking years.
Yes.
Yeah.
They also repeated the fine people hoax.
Yeah.
That said that Trump called neo-Nazis fine people.
Right.
Which is demonstrably false. If you just listen to his speech, he absolutely makes it clear that he does not think neo-Nazis are fine people.
He literally said that. I'm not talking about neo-Nazis or white nationalists. They should be condemned totally.
Exactly. In that speech, and yet they repeated that lie. And I just completely lost respect for Obama when he repeated that lie a few days before the election, knowing it's false.
Yeah, knowing it was false. Happens a lot in politics, doesn't it? And I'm not saying it's a left thing exclusively. I think they all do it to a certain degree. I don't think Donald Trump is lying when he says this, because we've just seen it happen in Canada in the last week. Trump says banks discriminate against his supporters while White House prepares an order. So let's have a look at this story from Reuters, which is one of the Trusted News Initiative mainstays. You guys know what that is, right? The Trusted News Initiative. CBC is a big part of that. They all push the COVID narrative in lockstep. Donald Trump said yesterday that he believes banks discriminate against him and his supporters, adding that the Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, had previously refused to accept his deposits. They totally discriminate against, I think, me, maybe even more, but they discriminate against many conservatives, he told CNBC. I think the word might be Trump supporters more than conservatives. Trump made the comments when asked about a report by the Wall Street Journal that said he planned to punish banks that discriminated against conservatives, but he did not address the order specifically. The order instructs regulators to review banks for politicized or unlawful debanking practices, according to a draft reviewed by Reuters. While they did discriminate, Trump said of actions taken by J.P. Morgan Chase after his first term in office, I had hundreds of millions. I had many, many accounts loaded up with cash, and they told me, I'm sorry, sir, we can't have you. You have 20 days to get out. Trump said without providing evidence. Of course, they always say that. Without providing evidence. What's he going to carry evidence around with him in his pocket at all times? That he believed the bank's refusal to take his deposits indicated the administration of former President Joe Biden had encouraged banking regulators to destroy Trump. Meanwhile, here in Canada, Royal Bank shuts down Evichipiak, Freedom Convoy lawyers' accounts over risk concerns. You knew this story, came out a couple of weeks ago, or maybe just a week ago. Eva, lawyer known for her involvement in the Freedom Convoy, vocal criticism of Canadian institutions, has been blindsided after the Royal Bank of Canada terminated their relationship with her, citing risk-related concerns. Risk. According to an official letter, the banking institution sent to Chipiak, her recent activity was outside of RBC's client risk appetite, and it would no longer be in a position to continue serving her. Having a bank account is not a luxury. It's a necessity in order to exist in this society, in this system that they have designed around us. And so for them to take services away based upon some ambiguous rule that they make up as they go along, they could probably apply to thousands, if not millions of other people. Seems like a bridge too far to me. So the bank gave her until August 18th to find an alternative financial institution. Chipiuk says the move came after a flagged transaction involving a Bitcoin purchase. The last interaction I had with RBC before they closed my account was when they froze it after I transferred some money to purchase Bitcoin, Chipiuk said. I called them to confirm the transaction was legitimate. So how is that a problem? She verified it. Chipiuk says RBC told her they'd have to consult their fraud department and then proceeded to ask her a number of very strange and demeaning questions. I think her words were, they made me feel like a criminal. Eventually, they cleared the account, told me to be careful with crypto. She insists the bank gave her no further explanation, only sending a letter saying her account would be closed in 30 days. RBC's official correspondence says that it's acting in accordance with federal regulations. Of course they are. Of course they are. Designed to belittle and humiliate anybody who opposes them. Now, Bow Valley Credit Union did come to the rescue. Getting back to the Nova Scotia hiking in the forest ban with a penalty of up to $25,000. Our friend from Veterans for Freedom, Jeff Evely, dropped a video on his Twitter earlier. It was sent to me while the show has been going on tonight, and here's what he had to say.
Hey everybody, Jeff Evely here. I'm in Petersfield Provincial Park in the most tyrannical province of Canada, which is Nova Scotia, with my fuzzy friend Axel, where we walk pretty much every single morning. And here you can see that this area is taped off because that trail is the woods. But this area is not taped off because that's not the woods. This area is taped off because that's the woods, and there is a sign here that says trail closed due to extreme fire hazard. So that is the woods. This area is not the woods. This area is the woods. This area is not the woods. This area is the woods. This area is not the woods. This area is the woods. This area is not the woods. This area is the woods. This area is not the woods. This is the woods. If we go in there, fires will start. Axel, come on. Come on, buddy. You're going to start a fire. Come on.
Jeff, somebody's going to report
this
you.
This area is not the woods. Right, buddy? Now, the first time the Tyrant Tim pulled this crap, this area was the woods, and there were pylons all across this trail, so I could not enter in 2023. But this is 2025, so it's not the woods. This area is the woods.
That's good. That's really good. This area is the woods. Kind of like sitting down in a restaurant is okay. But if you stand up and go to the bathroom, you got to put a mask on. Arbitrary rules that make absolutely zero sense. Designed to demoralize and intimidate. Don't let it get to you. Jeff's making fun. Good laugh. People realize how ridiculous this is. And it wouldn't surprise me if people just go into the woods anyway. And somebody is going to get hauled out, slapped with a fine of $25,000, and then it becomes a constitutional court case. And I'm sure the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms would be all over it. The president of JCCF joins the show tomorrow night, John Carpe, 8 o'clock Central on Shadow at Night Live. Thank you all for being here tonight. Catch you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. I love you all and appreciate you all. The extension coming up in just a second for the All Access Nighthawks at shadowdavis.com involves the Cloward-Piven strategy, illegal migration, and a great piece put out a couple of days ago by our friend from Rebel, Alexa Lavoie. catching migrants coming over the border using cameras at all hours of the night. I put this whole thing together earlier today, and you guys are going to get to enjoy it in the next couple of minutes. All access. I'll see you in 2 minutes. The rest of you, I'll catch you tomorrow night. Have a great sleep, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.